Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, in an unprecedented ruling, Korea's Constitutional Court disbands the left-wing Unified Progressive Party, citing its anti-state activities. The UN General Assembly approves a resolution asking the Security Council to bring North Korean leaders before the International Criminal Court for human rights abuses. Plus, the White House calls the recent hack attack against Sony Pictures a serious national security matter, but stops short of blaming North Korea. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Friday, December 19th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome, and we start with the groundbreaking news that Korea's Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of dissolving the minor opposition Unified Progressive Party.
The leftist party has been accused of violating South Korea's constitutional order and of trying to instigate a rebellion against the South Korean government. For the latest, we connect live to our Ji Myung-gil, who is standing by at the Constitutional Court. Myung-gil, fill us in.
Yes, Jin-joo. Well, today the Constitutional Court of Korea has ruled to disband Korea's minor opposition Unified Progressive Party. The Justice Ministry also filed a petition last year to disband the party. This is the first time that the court has ordered a breakup of a political party since it was founded back in 1988. And 8 of 9 judges were in favor of the disbandment. During a national televised ruling, Justice Park Han-cheol said the party had violated South Korea's constitutional order. The party's 4 members, including lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, were arrested last year of trying to instigate a rebellion against the South Korean government.
So with the party officially disbanded, Myung-gil, it begs the question as to what happens to the party's lawmakers.
Well, Mark, all 5 of the Unified Progressive Party lawmakers will be stripped of their party membership. The party's property will also be reverted back to the national treasury. And today's ruling also prohibits any party with similar goals and ideology from being established in the future.
An hour and a half ago, any reactions from the 2 main rival parties?
Yes, well, Jin-joo, the ruling Seoul Party has actually welcomed the decision. The ruling party has been calling for the disbandment of the UPP, accusing that the lawmakers actually implemented some pro-North Korea actions. But the mood was a bit different over at the main opposition parties. They accused the ruling party by saying that it goes against the country's principles of democracy. This morning, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy and the other minor opposition Justice Party lawmakers held small protests at the National Assembly, urging the Constitutional Court to deliver a fair ruling and not to be swayed by political pressure.
So, Myung-gil, this is the first ever ruling in Korea's history to disband a party. How is this going to affect the political landscape in the coming days and months ahead?
Well, Mark, it certainly has been a full blow to the political arena in Korea, as it has been the first time that the Constitutional Court actually ruled to dissolve a political party, saying it went against South Korea's constitutional order for plotting against the government. The judges found common ground that the only answer towards solving the case was dissolving the UPP. It is the first time that government has called for the disbandment on one of Korea's political party, and we will have to wait and see later on what reactions the UPP will give towards today's decision. This has been Ji Myung-gil reporting live from the Constitutional Court of Korea.
And moving on, there's been overwhelming support in the United Nations for a resolution condemning North Korea for its alleged human rights abuses. UN member nations voted yes to referring the North Korean leadership to the International Criminal Court. And as you might expect, North Korea was outraged by the result and says it's the victim of a political takedown. Song Ji-san reports.
The UN General Assembly has voted in favor of referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor 116, against 20, abstentions 53. Draft Resolution 1 is adopted.
The non-binding resolution drafted by the EU and Japan was previously approved by the Assembly's Third Committee, which deals with human rights. This vote comes after a UN Commission released a report in February that detailed the extent of abuses in the north, including political prison camps, torture, starvation, and mass killings. The UN Security Council will meet next Monday to discuss the resolution, but it's almost certain to face stiff opposition from veto-wielding powers, China and Russia. Because of this, watchers say that while the Assembly vote increases international pressure on North Korea, it's largely symbolic. Pyongyang's envoy to the UN lashed out at the passage of the resolution.
My delegation totally rejects the resolution because the resolution has nothing to do with promotion and protection of human rights, and it is a product of a political plot and confrontation against the DPRK.
He added that North Korea was ready for dialogue and cooperation on human rights, but said the issue was being used as an instrument for regime change. Western nations are moving to put North Korea on the UN Security Council's agenda, but China opposes the move, saying the Council is not the proper forum for discussions on human rights. The General Assembly also passed a resolution on Thursday condemning rights abuses in Syria and Iran, but did not go as far as referring them to the ICC. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's foreign ministry has welcomed the passage of a UN resolution on North Korea's human rights violations and called on Pyongyang to implement concrete measures to improve the situation. In a statement Friday, the ministry said the adoption of the strongest resolution yet reflects the international community's determination to deal with North Korea's human rights abuses. The ministry added the South Korean government continually urges North Korea to take specific and practical actions to enhance its human rights conditions. Now, in the third and final part of our special three-part series of reports on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's first 3 years in power, we take a look at Pyongyang's rare attempt to re-engage with the outside world. But as our Hwang Seong-hee tells us, it merely served to deepen the regime's diplomatic isolation.
Getting cozy with Russia, sending a high-level delegation to South Korea, negotiating the abductee issue with Japan, and releasing American detainees. North Korea engaged in a series of unusual diplomatic overtures this year as it found itself on the outs with its longtime ally, China. But the efforts proved unsuccessful.
Led by the United Nations, North Korea came under strong pressure to improve its human rights issue. Consequently, its efforts to diversify diplomacy hit hurdles and the regime became even more isolated.
Pyongyang warned of more nuclear tests to counter the latest UN push on its human rights violations.
In their attempts to eliminate the state and social system of the DPRK is compelling us not to refrain any further from conducting nuclear tests.
But analysts doubt Pyongyang will be so hasty with a nuclear test, since that would anger its allies China and Russia, although the regime will likely launch a violent protest.
Their strategy, their playbook, is to respond with force. Fight fire with fire. Another nuclear test, another missile launch. Satellite launch, I think, will be coming in 2015.
That would further delay the possible resumption of the long-stalled six-party nuclear talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Nonetheless, experts say North Korea will be more aggressive with multilateral dialogue next year and seek diplomacy at the highest level.
In order to end its current diplomatic isolation, North Korea will be more vocal about resuming the six-party talks. In that process, it could seek a visit to China or Russia by Kim Jong-un.
Seoul's Unification Ministry echoes that view. It expects Pyongyang to use all means available for a bilateral meeting with Washington. There could also be some progress in negotiations with Japan by July, marking the one-year anniversary of opening such talks. And if these all-out efforts to end its diplomatic isolation fail, the ministry says North Korea could seek an opening by turning to South Korea. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, from the onset of the investigation into the hacking attack on Sony Pictures, North Korea was the prime suspect in most people's eyes. Their involvement is becoming more and more apparent now with each new piece of evidence that emerges. And while the White House spoke about the investigation on Thursday local time and called the attack a very serious matter, it refrained from officially pinpointing Pyongyang. Gwon-soa reports.
A serious national security matter. That's how the White House labeled the cyber attack on Sony Pictures. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said that the evidence suggests there was malicious intent behind the hacking and that it was done by a sophisticated actor. But he did not name North Korea as being that actor. He said a range of possibilities were being considered and that the Justice Department and FBI was still investigating. But all signs seem to implicate Pyongyang, and some with knowledge of the probe say their involvement has in fact been determined. A U.S. official said the hackers stole a Sony administrator's identification card, giving them access to the entire building. Another piece of information came from a North Korean defector who claims he was part of a North Korean agency called Bureau 121, which trains around 18,000 people to become members of a hacker's army. Sony, while the victim here, has not dodged criticism for canceling the theatrical release of the movie The Interview, which centers on a CIA plan to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Some say the studio caved into the demands of the hackers and that their reaction could open up new threats of the kind against others in the future. Gwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now, the nation's nuclear power plant operator has asked the prosecution to open investigation into an alleged hacking attack. The Korea Hydro Nuclear Power Company said late Thursday that internal documents that included information on employees and nuclear reactors were leaked online. The hackers, who identified themselves as Who Am I, released the stolen data on their blog, which has since been shut down. The nuclear operator has launched its own internal probe into this incident. There are concerns confidential data, such as blueprints for nuclear reactors, could have been leaked, but officials have denied such claims. The South Korean government has welcomed the restoration of diplomatic ties between the United States and Cuba and expressed hope for improved ties between Seoul and Havana as well. A foreign ministry spokesperson says South Korea seeks cooperative relations with all countries beyond social ideologies or systems. Among over 190 UN member states, the number of countries that do not have diplomatic relations with South Korea but have them with North Korea amount to just 3. Cuba, Syria and Macedonia. South Korea severed diplomatic ties with Cuba in the late 1950s after Cuba's communist revolution. Cuba established diplomatic relations with North Korea in 1960. US Congressman Mike Honda, who has been at the forefront of steering efforts to resolve the issue of Japan's wartime sexual slavery of Korean women, is right here in Korea for a 5-day visit. And he met with reporters in Seoul on Thursday, where he said it was time for Japan to take action on this highly emotive issue. Kim Min-ji reports.
A U.S. lawmaker says Japan needs to recognize its historical responsibility and apologize for its wartime sexual enslavement of women. Speaking to reporters in Seoul, Representative Michael Honda says this is a problem that needs to be resolved with urgency, considering the age of the victims. Only 54 of the Korean victims are still alive, and their average age is 88.
How many, they're getting older. And I don't want us to use the tactic of outweighing them and, waiting until they all pass away. That would not be acceptable.
Honda, who is of Japanese descent, also said it is nonsense to question whether the women were coerced into sexual slavery.
Coercion was there, and it was a great part of why girls and women were kidnapped into sexual slavery.
Honda, who was at the forefront of the passage of a landmark 2007 resolution condemning Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women, said recent talks between Seoul and Tokyo on the matter were productive and helpful, even though they have yet to reach a breakthrough on the issue. The lawmaker said that the U.S. will continue to communicate with the Japanese Prime Minister to move the issue forward.
Hopefully now we can move this issue forward to create a greater political pressure and peer pressure to the government of Japan.
The Japanese-American lawmaker is in Seoul for a 5-day visit, which will take him to a house for former sex slaves, as well as a string of meetings with government officials. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Well, it's that time in the newscast where we take a look at the global headlines that we're following. It's Friday afternoon here in Seoul. For all the latest stories, we turn to Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center.
Eunice, Thursday was a big day for U.S. stocks as the Dow Jones recorded its biggest leap in 3 years, jumping 2.4%.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The Dow saw a triple-digit gain for a second day in a row, gaining more than 420 points. That's the biggest one-day gain since December of 2011. Now, not a bad day for the S&P 500 and NASDAQ either, all on the back of that Fed announcement that it would show patience on raising interest rates, likely not until after April. Let's go ahead and take a look at the numbers. The Dow and the S&P 500 both seeing a gain of 2.4%, and the NASDAQ composite a hike of 2.2%. There, investors snatched up tech stocks, which led the rally, with the database software company Oracle spearheading the charge. Its stock rose by 10.2% on Thursday. Sony shares also rose after days of decline. After that announcement that Sony Pictures would not release its controversial comedy, The Interview. Now, the buying spree is being attributed to U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen's guidance that the central bank was in no rush to raise its key interest rate, even as the U.S. economy looked to be improving. And a very different picture over in Russia. Despite this week's capital flight, Russian President Vladimir Putin spent his annual year-end news conference assuring the media that his economy will bounce back at most in 2 years. He also blamed Russia's economic woes on a West that wants to declaw it, while adding that adequate measures were being taken by Moscow.
There are also some questions to both the government and the central bank about the timing and quality of those measures, but as a whole, the actions are absolutely adequate and in the right direction. There is also no doubt, and I would like to underline it, the rebound, the subsequent rise of the ruble, and the exit from the current situation is unavoidable.
Russia's currency, the ruble, has been losing steam. It's lost about half of its value against the U.S. dollar this year amid falling oil prices and economic sanctions. Finally, the European Union's highest court has ruled that being obese could be seen as a disability under certain circumstances. In a case brought by a childcare worker who argued he was fired for being obese, the court ruled that though obesity itself was not a disability, it can be considered one if it hinders full and effective participation. The ruling is binding across EU nations. Groups defending the rights of the obese praised the ruling as a step forward against discrimination against those who are overweight.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
On the trade front, memory chips have topped the list of Korea's biggest export item for the second consecutive year, setting a new record in the process. Korea's trade ministry says on Thursday that memory chip exports surpassed $60 billion for the year. That figure is equivalent to the total export volume of Portugal. Rising demand in the mobile sector and emerging markets are backing the strong growth in memory chip exports. Memory chips account for 10% of Korea's exports, ahead of ships and cars. From nut rage to nut craze, the scandal surrounding the former vice president of Korean Air has been a major headache for the company, but it's given Koreans a taste for the macadamia nut, the innocuous snack that triggered the whole controversy in the first place. Shin Se-min has the story.
Macadamia nuts, which were thrust into the spotlight as a result of recent nut rage incident here in Korea, have been a range of its own lately. They are flying off the shelves and selling out online. The incident that battered the career and reputation of former Korean Air executive Cho Hyun-ah has been a boon for the macadamia nut industry in the country. Major online shopping mall G-Market saw sales surge by 20 times last week compared to the week before. Large offline chains like Costco and Lotte Mart have also seen a considerable jump in demand. Suppliers couldn't be happier. More than 80% of Korea's imports come from the birthplace of the macadamia nut, Australia. The Australian Macadamia Society said in a press release that it would renew its focus on the Korean market. Hawaii's $38 million macadamia nut industry is also feeling the effects.
This week alone, we have received requests for pricing and information on our product line from 4 or 5 different groups from Korea.
And while demand is rising, some question its origin.
It's absurd, and it's unfortunate that this has become the focus of the nation when we have other real problems hurting the nation.
And as for the best way to enjoy the nuts,
yes, macadamia nuts, whether they're served in a bag or on a silver platter, it's the same great tasting, very classy nut, no matter how you have them served.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, in other exciting news, the world's largest furniture retailer has arrived in Korea finally. Ikea opened its doors for the first time to the public on Thursday, and they're hoping to thrive in a furniture market that's already pretty saturated. Connie Kim reports.
The freezing cold weather isn't stopping people from waiting in long lines to be among the first inside Korea's first Ikea. Now, as you can see behind me, there is a seemingly endless line of people waiting to get a glimpse of the Scandinavian-style furniture inside.
This is new to me and quite different from conventional Korean furniture.
However, the Swedish furniture giant's entry into the market wasn't without controversy. Known for its low prices, Ikea's arrival has sparked concern among small and family-owned businesses that offer ready-made furniture at premium prices. Ikea has also caused a stir for inflating the prices of some of its pieces compared to global locations. It also drew criticism for its high transport and assembly fees. But Ikea says it's ready to offer something different to appeal the Korean market.
We have studied the Korean market. We have done a lot of home visits. We visited over 80 homes and had really thorough interviews with the people living in these mainly apartments to understand the needs.
Ikea designed this living room set specifically for the Korean market, tailoring it to the space in local apartments. The company created new storage units for the verandas often found in Korean apartments and special beds designed to fit into the space so people can use the space to get a quick rest. After discovering that Korean parents traditionally spend more on children's furniture than parents in other countries, Ikea Korea expanded their selection. In short, Ikea is offering more choices and possibly lower prices. But the question now is how consumers will react to what the Swedish furniture giant has to offer and what that means for the competition in the local market. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, the cold subsides this afternoon and the highs will finally get above the freezing mark here in Seoul. But we have another band of snow in the forecast from this evening. Seoul could receive up to 7 centimeters into tomorrow morning, but some parts in Gangwon-do province could get up to 15 centimeters. So a heavy snow watch could be issued in those regions later in the day. So for those who plan to be outside later tonight, beware of icy roads. And with that, here are the readings for today. The afternoon temperature here in capital will hike up to 1, while Daegu and Gwangju peak at 4 and 5 respectively. And as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will be peaking to 10, while Daejeon and Dokdo tops out at 3 and 7. Now temperatures will plunge again on Sunday, but things will turn mild again from Monday afternoon, and readings should remain on the mild side for the remainder of the month. That's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that just about does it. Those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching.